Hi, everybody. Welcome to SONOR Family. I'm your host, Zack Stewart. As always, coming to you from Nashville, Tennessee, and I'm very happy to be joined today by Mr. Glenn Kotche. Glenn, how you doing?
Doing fine. Thanks. Great to be here.
Yeah, thanks for doing this. Before we kind of get into all the fun music and drum and sonar stuff we're going to talk about, yours is a bit unique because you and I have some similar history with University of Kentucky.
Yeah.
You went there, and I did as well, and did all the drumline stuff. But I was kind of getting ready for this. I was actually thinking about another connection we had. It's kind of funny. My high school percussion instructor, he marched in the Cavaliers drum corps.
Oh.
And I would, as a freshman, I was going to take lessons because I wanted to be a tenor drummer in the drum line.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember he had his big picture from the year he marched, and he would, every now and again, he would talk about the guys and what they were doing and who marched. And you were one of the guys. I remember him being like, "Yeah, this guy Glenn, he went to UK too, because he went to UK as well. His name was Jed Manier. I don't know if you remember Jed or not."
Yep.
But anyhow, he's like, "Yeah, he's doing all this drum set stuff," and it's kind of left it at that. So I was like, "Oh, I always remembered like this guy Glenn who marched with him who did drum set stuff." So kind of crazy, and all the largeness of the world, but also the kind of how small it can be very quickly,
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Jed, he's a great guy.
Yeah.
He's a band director now, I believe.
Yeah. And also there in the Cavaliers, a guy I ended up taking some lessons with later. I just remember you probably marched with too, was Pat McGowan. Tenor drummer. Yeah. Legend in that world.
Yeah, he's a monster. I actually saw him a few years ago at a Wilco show in Michigan.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Very cool. Yeah, we haven't touched base in probably 17, 18 years. But cool, man. Well, like I said, through Jed, he exposed us to a lot of stuff, and actually got to see you at the University of Kentucky would host a day of percussion through PAS each year. Mm-hmm. And you did a clinic there in the early 2000s. I don't know if you remember that one in particular. I'm sure you do a lot.
I was really nervous for that one because I was back on my home turf, and a lot of the guys who, when I was a freshman, they were the former Cavalier guys and percussion majors that I used to look up to, and they were in the audience for that. So I know it was a lot of pressure for me, but I think I did okay.
Yeah, no, it was, man, honestly, for me, I mean, I was in high school, and, I don't know where my head was musically and drumming and all that, but, to see your approach with kind of combining the percussion element of, percussion ensemble into like applicable drum set playing, obviously you do a lot of solo stuff, but I remember in particular, like, and I wasn't even really familiar with, much of what you'd done at that point, but seeing it, you would talk about, oh, in this song I do this. And, again, the normal mindset would be, well, you don't do that, or be using crotales on something in addition or in conjunction with the traditional drum set. And I just, it was the first time I'd ever seen someone do that. And, I don't do that kind of setup myself, but it's always something that's stuck in my head of like, think outside the box, and you can create some great sounds,
Yeah, I guess that whole kind of approach just came from studying at UK under Jim. And, even previous to that, just being exposed to percussion ensemble and all sorts of different, ensembles. I always played drum set since I was a little kid, and I've always, loved that. That was my passion. But, besides the marching stuff, doing orchestral or percussion ensemble or, any other, backing up dance classes or choruses or anything like that. Some of those gigs you need to use and incorporate different percussion instruments. And so it was just kind of natural for me, like, oh, I know how to use this stuff. At some point, something clicked. Like, I learned all this technique on these other instruments. I know how to play them. And you know what? It would actually sound really good in the song right here. So I'm just going to incorporate it onto my kit or into my playing, whether it's an overdub or on the kit live. And it ended up being a asset for me because, I mean, as you well know, living in Nashville, when I moved back to my hometown, Chicago, after college, every year there's dozens and dozens of drummers from all the universities, in the Midwest. Chicago's the big city. So everything, a lot of guys are coming to Chicago to make it or to be a professional drummer, besides the people who just bypassed college programs. So there was a lot of competition, of course.
Yeah.
And I think that approach was something that I benefited from, just because it was something a little different, like you said, a little left field, or it gave me a little more originality or something to set me apart for the people who were looking for that sort of thing,
Yeah.
which isn't everyone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think the way that you've done it, has been very organic and it's very musical, which is, to me, like, that's as long as something fits those categories, like, I'm cool with it, I think so many times when people come in with a different influence like that, it's just too far removed to where it can only work in like one context, and
Right.
I think you've done a great job of incorporating that, obviously, with Wilco, and how you use that with a more, I keep saying, like, traditional drum setup, but then also your solo performances and the on Fillmore stuff I've seen, and all the other kind of projects you've been involved in. You seem to kind of, I guess, evolve from that. One thing that I've always kind of wondered, as I've seen your stuff progress, when you're composing an ensemble piece or something original, do you kind of start with the instrumentation, or do you just start hearing sounds and say, I'm going to throw this in? As far as, like, you kind of give yourself, this is my limit of the voices I have, or you just go, it's wide open and I'll figure out the setup? Because obviously that's an important part, since you're one performer most of the time. Do you say, I'll figure out how I'm going to set this up later as far as logistics go?
Gosh, that's a good question. And you're strictly speaking about solo pieces, right?
Yeah.
Okay, which is actually, I've been the last month or so, I've been getting a lot of ideas and working up a whole new set of solo music too. So it's interesting you ask this question now, and it kind of comes from all over the place. Like, sometimes it's just sitting down and at the kit and just start playing, and I'm like, oh, there's an idea, and then I develop it and work on it. Where other times I have a structure, I have an idea in my head, and then I have to figure out how to do it, as one person. And for me, at least, keeping it as a drummer, I'm a drummer. I try not to be a one-man band. So keeping it within the realm of percussion. And sometimes I'll be like, it needs this. So that one, it needs this melody. I can do the drum part. If I figure it out and replace this note with the bass drum, okay, I can do everything with my right hand and my bass drum. Okay, which leaves my left foot and left hand, so I can play a kalimba melody here, or a glockenspiel or crotale, and then the hi-hat can fade in this loop that I made, or something like that, or using the SPD as well. So I know I have options for these other sounds to take the piece where I want it to go, and basically, a lot of times, end up trying to disseminate an idea down to as few limbs as possible, to open up other limbs to do other things.
Yeah. Interesting. So you basically use like a human mix down, like they did in the studio if they didn't have enough channels, to say, okay, I need that one to do this, I need to free up this guy for that. Interesting. I
got to bounce this part down to 2 limbs instead of 3, or something like that. That's how it's been working lately. And it always comes, sometimes I get a melody and I just pick it out on vibes, and then I'll transfer it over later. Sometimes I get a drum set idea and it just develops. And, sometimes I'll go in and actively write for a few hours, where other times it's just 5 minutes here or there over the course of a week, and things just brew up here. And, I take cues from what I'm hearing throughout the day, or my interactions with people, or what it's, anything I watch, any art I'm exposed to. And sometimes I'm able to develop it slowly over time too. So it's just kind of, depends on the piece in the moment.
Yeah. Well, obviously through, all the different setups, and of course when you're, playing with Wilco, I think kind of at the heart of it usually is a drum set, bass drum, some sort of tom, snare kind of thing. And that's obviously Sonar drums. How long have you been with Sonar?
Since I'm not sure if it was 2000. I think it was 2002. I joined Wilco like January 2nd or 3rd of 2001, and I was still using my different, like, old WFLs, or my old Tama kit from junior high or something on some things. And then I realized, like, oh yeah, this stuff is just getting destroyed on the road. And so I reached out to Sonar. I'm guessing it was 2002.
Okay.
Tomas would know exactly. I'm sure they have it in the records there.
Yeah. So I'm always interested because like even like myself growing up in the States, you know, everybody saw Sonar. It probably wasn't as prevalent as some of the other drum brands. So, you know, was it an impression you had before that when you decided, okay, I need to, you know, figure this out for equipment reasons and obviously durability. And of course you want something that's going to sound good. Was there impressions before you really kind of reached out to the company that made you say like, yeah, this is somebody I'd like to talk to and play their instruments?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, growing up, I grew up in Roselle, Illinois. It's just a little suburb straight west of the city. And there was a music shop there, Roselle Music. And for a period there was a guy who worked there, Ross Salamone, I think it was his name. And he just built a great little percussion department there. And I'd go down in the basement in summers like this, ride my bike up there, and I'd kind of hang out at the music store, you know, way too long. And I, you know, just geeking out on gear and any other drummers who would come through just listening and, you know, whatever. Yeah. But I always remember Sonar kits being the top of the mountain. Those were the kits that were like, oh, this is like, you know, the Untouchables. Yeah. They were not only the most expensive kits, but also, you know, great sounding, amazing kits. And, you know, when it came to getting my first new drum set, you know, as opposed to my little old used piece together kit, you know, obviously I wanted a Sonar, but it was way out of our price range. So we went with something else, but I always, you know, kind of felt that was like the Rolls Royce. That was, you know, what I would aspire to get someday. And so when I got in a band, I was like, you know what, I'm gonna give it a shot and see. I probably don't have, and so I was lucky enough that I got the deal right away, and I've been with them since, and it's been, you know, it's been a great relationship, and I've never thought twice about that relationship. It's always been really, really great. I've always been more than happy with the drums.
Yeah. Well, I think too, you know, it's interesting, like I said, because you have such a unique perspective, not only playing, you know, normal setups, but, you know, using in the context of either solo pieces or where you're incorporating other percussion instruments. You know, when you're designing a setup or looking at something and, you know, going back to, again, those more traditional drums, it might be part of your setup, like kick drum, toms, floor tom, snare drum. Are there any like sizes or drums as far as like you know, you say, oh man, I think this piece would sound really good with my 20-inch vintage beach bass drum, or this one would sound good with this. Is there any kind of, you know, go-to drums you have when you have those certain setups?
Well, and yeah, not to derail your question, but you know what, when I first got my Sonar drums, I kind of originally got just a loaner kit to record with while my first kit was being built, and I could figure that out. But one of the big tests for me was, you know, at that time for my solo music, and I still do this, but I did it a lot more then, is I didn't have a bass drum on my solo kit. I would use a floor tom cocktail style. You know, something I learned from Maureen Tucker, but there were also cocktail kits, you know, throughout, and they had the reverse pedals. So I would take pedals apart, reverse them, and pre-Wilco, and have the pedal hit the bottom of the floor tom head. And so I'd have to use a different type of head, a heavier head, a hydraulic head with some padding, and it didn't always sound good on any drum. And when I got the Sonars, I did that for solo pieces, and also just for recording with Wilco, because I used that on some, and sometimes even live I would do it then. But that for me was the true test, because it sounded great as a miniature bass drum. You know, originally I started doing that to save space. When I was touring in vans and rental cars, and we didn't have room, you know, for a lot of you know, drums. So I did that to save space and for quick setup. And then I loved it on my solo setups because it wasn't a traditional setup. It was more of a multiple percussion setup. But that to me was the test, like, okay, this sounds amazing that way. But I do have now several different kits that I go to for different sounds, and just kind of try out different things. You know, I would say it's almost just as much feel based as sound based, though, for me. Yeah. You know, like I just love how this drum feels when I play it, how it reacts to me, the sound I get from it, and I'm in the mood for that. And that's kind of what I decide to set up in the studio, at least. And I go through, you know, different kits. I do have the a vintage kit with beach shells, which I use now that as my solo kit, because it's nice and warm, and it kind of works with my solo kit. At least the drums aren't always sounding evenly like the toms. Each one sounds almost like a different instrument, and that's one thing I love about Sonor is the versatility of that. Because it may not sound like, oh, these are my 3 toms, one's high, one's middle, one's low. It's more like, no, this is some weird higher pitched drum. This is some low thunderous drum. And this drum in between is more of an all-purpose tom. So I love on my solo setup, at least, giving an individual personality to each one of those drums. On the Wilco kit, it's a much more unified sound and a specific sound that fits in with the music. Now, that being said, Wilco's music can kind of go all over the spectrum within the rock canon, right? From kind of folky stuff to more rock to experimental and jagged to European krautrock rock to whatever, everything in between to noisy electronic experimental stuff. So when I'm recording, I try out different things. Whether it's the acrylic kit, I have the beach shells, I have a lot of maple shells for the SQ2s, but also the Pro lights. And I just kind of switch. I also have a 72 vintage Sonor kit that I love. That's what the finish of which my newest kit is based on, my SQ2. But so I'll switch different things in and out, and they're not always predictable either. One of my, I would say easily the number one drum question I get is what snare drum I used on a Wilco record called Sky Blue Sky. And this was our first record recorded with our current lineup, which has been intact for 16 years now. But it was done differently than some of the previous records. We all got in a room together at our Wilco loft near here and just sat in a circle and wrote the record and recorded it that way. No baffling, no separation, no anything. And I get a lot of questions about how warm and deep and beautiful and subtle that snare drum sound is. And ironically, it's in acrylic. I have it right over here. It's an acrylic, a 5.5 inch acrylic drum. It just is so versatile that with the right heads and a little padding, it just sounded like a nice, big, beautiful, deep drum, which is completely counterintuitive because you'd think it would be a maple drum or something like that, or a beach shell or something.
I'm so happy you said that. I've seen the I think it was called the X-Ray line with Designer, and it's continued, I believe, with SQ2. But earlier this year, we were on the road for a few weeks, and I was in California, and we've been kind of the artists I play with. We've been doing kind of a club strip down thing, and my kits remain the same, a few differences just for different sounds and whatnot. But I saw a 13x7 acrylic Sonor snare. And I was like, I honestly bought it thinking it would be like a novelty drum. Like, I'll get it, play it for a while, and it's been my main snare. And I've actually been using it here to track with. And I mean, 13 seemed to be coming a little back into fashion, but this, I don't know if it's because it's 7, or I've always kind of said, with different materials, whether it be maple, birch, beech, acrylic, there's kind of the standard versions of that. Like, I think a lot of people would be very familiar with like an Vistalite from Ludwig, it's kind of the acrylic drums. I've played those. The Sonor acrylic sounds completely different, it's like a whole different thing. So yeah, you're right. It was like a total surprise to me. Like I said, I bought the drum thinking, at best, it'll be a side snare. It looks cool. I'll screw around with it. And now, I just left the head on it as it was. Actually, one of the guys from Remo had come out to the show. I said, I'm going to try this drum. We'll see. And I got there and played a backbeat. We both went like, it's fine. You can play it tonight. You don't need to tune it. Sounds good to me. Yeah. So the acrylics, it was a total surprise for me too. Yeah.
And I think I originally got those because I was like, oh, this is new. Those look cool. I want to, I think it was even Jeff Tweedy, our singer, saw them and he's like, oh, you should get those. That would look cool. And I was like, yeah, man, I'm going to get some of those. And
so you got the whole kit?
But And I have awesome. So I used it with Wilco for several years. And then I also have a solo version because, the solo version is just like a 2 or 3 piece kit. So I had enough to so I could be doing both. If my drums were off somewhere else, I could still do the solo stuff.
Okay.
But it was completely rethought and redesigned from those early Vistalite kits. Like you said, the bearing edges are totally different. The way the seams come together, they're just, they sound great. So yeah. I still have those at the Wilco loft, and we'll pull those out every once in a while and love that snare. But you mentioned the 13x7 snare. So that's a new thing. I actually let, this is going to sound probably infuriating to most drummers, but on my newest SQ2, I let my tech, Ashwin Deepankar, he's just an amazing audio engineer, but also a fantastic drummer. And he just really is a super bright guy who knows how to get the drums to sound good out front and feel good for me, because those aren't always the same. Okay. Yeah. And in previous, years ago with Wilco, I would always want the drums to sound good when I'm playing them, where they are coming from me, so I would like them tuned a little bit higher sometimes, because the drums feel great when you can tune them high, right? Yeah. You get that response, where if they're really low, which fits with Wilco's music, you don't get that response. And sometimes that will, impact what you play, because you're not getting that response. You're not going to be doing doubles and stuff on them, because you're not going to get that type of response. So Ashwin's been great for me getting that compromise of what sounds amazing out front, but also, in my ears. And I let him choose all the sizes for my new SQ2.
Oh yeah,
which was cool. I just gave a couple specifications. I wanted, I use, I'm a Meinl endorser, percussion endorser, and I like using some of their hand drums on a kit sometimes. It's really low, just kind of these little thunder drums. I put a mic right underneath it, a hand drum, put it on a stand, and use it as like a weird tom. Yeah. So we got a couple of those, like basically they're 4" by 16 and 4" by 18" drums that I can use that way, that are, a lot more robust than the hand drums when we're doing a tour with Wilco. I still do the hand drums when I'm doing the, shows with the dance company and solo shows and stuff. But, and that works. I also have one that I have a foot operated marching machine that goes on it. So besides those, I let him choose the sizes, and he chose a deep snare, much deeper than I normally would. So I think it's a 14x7. And I could be wrong in that, and that just goes back to what you were talking about. Yeah. And I love it. I never want to go back, because I can crank it up enough so I really get that response. After being in the Cavaliers and Drum and Bugle Corps, it's like playing on a tabletop when you play on a Kevlar head. And so I like that response. So I get that, but I still get the super deep tone. And so I love the snare drum from this SQ2 kit. And the other toms, they sound amazing. We even got a 13" rack tom with snares on it, because I've been using a snare drum up here on my solo stuff a lot more.
Yeah, I've seen that in some of the Instagram videos. Yeah.
So,
cool. But what wood did you go with for the new kit?
What
shell.
shells? The shell's maple.
Okay, right on. Yeah, like I said, it's I think I've obviously quite the Sonar nerd, so always kind of looking back at changes and what they made, and it always kind of goes back to like everybody. I've talked to quite a few people who all played different styles, different techniques, like you said, different backgrounds. People who had no training to people who had very specific training, and they all seem to kind of find not only the sound but the feel of the drum, and that's always a big one for me. When I'm on, like, especially like on a rental kit, and especially with the situation where I can't get Sonar, that's the biggest struggle. I can get the drums to sound good, but then it's like, man, I got to do 90 minutes and feel like it feels like I'm hitting a piece of wood for all the drums, like super hard, or it feels like I'm hitting marshmallows, and I just don't. And I've always said I don't know if there's any way to scientifically analyze it, but I've always thought something has to do with that smaller diameter of the shells that Sonar does. They're all slightly undersized, so it's more like almost like a timpani. So I don't know if that's what the reason is, but it's like, man, they always just feel great. Even when they're tuned. Even if I crank, you're talking about that deeper snare. I have an SQ2 that's 8x14, and I just pulled out for a couple of songs, thinking it'd be like, oh, this guy wants a couple ballady tunes, I'll use this drum, and then I kept it on a couple more tunes, cranked it up. didn't feel like it was choking off. And like you said, it was, I could really get a lot of attack. It felt great for me, but also felt like I had all that low end, to work with.
And that's something I should add also, in that time when I first joined Wilco, before I had the Sonar deal, when we do TV shows or whatever, I would get rental kits in and, the kit du jour or whatever. And I was trying out, and, I don't want to throw shade on other companies or whatever, but I was trying and getting different companies, big brands, the ones that are super, super popular, even today still. And just nothing really impressed me. I was like, oh, this sounds good. But the thing I noticed when I got the Sonars is that they sounded good at all levels. Okay. I'm really fortunate in Wilco that I get to use every night. I don't just use my signature stick. I also use mallets. I use felt mallets. I use soft felt mallets. I use 3 or 4 different kinds of brushes. I use cooking chopsticks. I use cooking utensils at any given Wilco show. Okay. So I'm using a lot of different implements on the drums, and I get to play, both grips. I get to use multiple stick grips. I get to play a lot of, I have a lot of dynamic range because we'll go from just acoustic guitar, very simple arrangements to full on blasts of noise. So the Sonar drums, I noticed, man, these not only sound great, but they feel great if I'm barely tapping them or if I'm laying into them. Where a lot of these other drums I tried out, it was like, they sound good, when I'm hitting right in that sweet spot, with this much force, it's a great sound, but it's not as versatile. And of course, everything comes down to tuning and what kind of heads and sticks and all that. But I've noticed, I switched what kind of heads I'm using all the time too. I'm not like a one head guy. They're always Evans, but I switch between, G2s and the level 360s and the etched ones I was using for a while. I use the dry heads. I use a lot of hydraulics, and it's whatever I put on, whatever stick or implement non-stick I'm using on the drums, they sound good. And I could get a huge range, tonal range, but also dynamic range. And that's perfect for me. Yeah.
Well, I think it's people with drums, and maybe because Sonar is a foreign company, I always like to use the car analogy. I'm personally not really a car guy, but I get it in that, you can have a car that's got a cool paint job, maybe got some cool looking wheels, but you open up the hood and it's like a little questionable. So I think that's the thing with Sonar is like under the hood, of course the outside always looks great, but under the hood, they're always solid, and no matter what, you kind of literally throw at it in your case, it's gonna, give you a response and, a tone you're looking for. But I'm glad you brought up the acrylic kit, because I've really been debating getting one after having the snare drum. So, oh man, I might have to get the whole kit now. I mean, after playing the snare drum, I was like, surely the rest of the kit's gonna sound awesome, the acrylic stuff. So now I'll trust your endorsement of it.
Yeah, and I think I used hydraulic heads on it. It was just super warm, but still cut, still really cut.
Yeah. We were talking about the vintage kit, because I've seen quite a few of your Instagram videos. As my Sonar nerd question for today, is that a highlight snare that you have? You're playing the red with the gold hardware?
I should know this. This is actually, I don't know if you're going to have to edit this out, but this was a gift from Tomas's predecessor, Milan.
Okay.
And
it was. Designer. Okay.
So it must be a designer. Yeah, designer.
Yeah,
it says it. I should know that.
Oh, okay.
But Wilco was headlining at the Garden on my birthday, and Milan flew in from Germany with his wife, and they caught the show, and he presented me with this, which was really nice, and a little birthday emblem on it. You probably can't read it, but it's a happy birthday from your Sonar family. And this is just a beautiful, drum. I don't have any other red sparkle drums, but I use this. This has been my go-to. It was with Wilco, but now solo. This is my go-to drum. It's just, again, really versatile. It sounds great. Yeah. Sometimes I have the preparations, all the stuff coming out of the head. It sounds great that way, or it sounds great just as I have some sandpaper here right now. Or just, as a regular rock snare. And again, it can sound nice and low and deep, or I can crank it up. But yeah, So that's a designer.
Okay, yeah. There's an older series called The Highlight that had I couldn't see the sparkle aspect of it, but I noticed you have the Sonar version of diecast, which they call the Hella Hoops, and that's another like Sonar thing. I've kind of gone back and forth with diecast, probably would more times lean against it, even on snares, but then, and again, I don't know if it's, because there's a slightly different, there's like a wider pattern around the tension rods than most diecast hoops, and for some reason with those hoops, it doesn't, I don't feel like I'm playing a diecast as much, like as far as my hand hurting or anything like that from kind of doing, rim shots, whatever. But yeah, like I said, but it was something that, before with some of the other diecast stuff I'd played, I'm like, yeah, I don't really want to go with that, but like that, and then the new hoop that's on the vintage drums, that one, it's like kind of in between a flanged and diecast, and it just feels great, and you get kind of that real kind of pingy sound out of it, again, without having to go like a super thick, a metal hoop that's gonna maybe hurt your hand or not give you the sound you want.
Yeah, and I mean, it's great because now, I mean, you can choose whatever you want.
Yeah.
I know people used to, when I first got the drums, some of my earlier techs were always like, oh, because it had the flat screwdriver type lugs, but now it's like, oh, that's not an issue anymore. Get whichever one you want. Any type of shells, the construction, the rim. So you can really personalize them.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, like I said, I think it's cool that no matter what situation you're in, that like, you're able to find the sound, I mean, I think that's, as some of the guys, obviously you've been with the company for, almost 20 years, but, there's guys who've been with the company 30, 40 years. And I think it's one of the few brands of drums that players like yourself are constantly progressing, not only in, your approach to the instrument, but literally how you're using the instrument, have stayed with, like, for example, like we mentioned earlier, when I was speaking with Steve Smith, he's someone who's constantly changing and evolving, but it's like Sonar he was always able to find what he wanted. He didn't just play the drums because like that's just what they gave him or whatever, and he's like, I'm still able to find a home for my sound and my feel in the drums,
No, that's a really good point too. Well, that brings up two thoughts. I mean, I do remember, as a kid knowing and seeing those big, it might have even been a Zildjian ad, but it showed Steve's huge Sonar kit, and that would make a huge impression on me because, from my older brother getting that captured record and listening to that, as like a 12-year-old or something listening to that drum solo on side two over and over and over and over, for years. It was like, that probably also played into my decision going to Sonar initially. But no, that is something because, like I said, I've gone between the Pro Lights and the vintage and the acrylics and the SQ2, and it's kind of as the band evolves and our sound evolves or our approach, because we've also gone from, or at least I've gone from, being on a riser in the back and to having in-ears and then going back to the floor and just using monitors where I am now. And so all those different experiences all those different situations change my listening experience on stage. And also just what, my proximity to my band members on stage, what the drums are going to sound like. Are they going to be too big? Are they going to be too bright? Are they going to be, what the ensemble's sounding like? Because we go through a lot of changes record from record. Some of our stuff is a lot more energetic. Some things are more introspective. So I've always been able to find the drums at Sonar that fit each one of those situations. And so, the band's able to grow in any direction, and I know it's not going to be an issue drum-wise, at least. Yeah.
No, that's same here, man. I mainly tour with one artist, but, even within that, his shows, I'm always wanting to change up things, or for, like you said, we're changing the venues we're doing for a particular part of the year, getting different sounds at home for sessions, and it's like, I've got, 5 or 6 kits here, then a bunch of snare drums, and I'm always, I love some of the old vintage stuff too, so I'm like, I'll get old 60s drums from Sonar and rewrap them if they're damaged or whatever, and so I just have a lot of random old Sonar sitting around here.
That's great. And that's another, I have to go back, to the versatility aspect too, because I remember when I first got the vintage series, and at that, I think we were doing like an outdoor shed tour right around then and playing a lot of festivals. And I was just like, I wonder if these, the vintage drums were more geared for warmer, darker, quieter sound or whatever. but they ended up working great in big places and outdoor venues, and they sounded great. And I was getting a lot of comments from other drummers and friends in the audience. So that's another thing. It's like you can almost go with whichever kit you do like the way it looks, or the feel of it. It's going to work in almost any circumstance. At least that's been my experience. I don't have to switch kits depending on whether we're doing a theater tour or a shed tour or a festival tour. I can use whatever I'm using, and it'll fit all those environments.
Yeah, I think most of the time I switch out kits is probably boredom, not because I'm bored of the drums look great and they're fun to play, but just like, well, I've got the other set at home. Let me take that one out. Let me take that one out.
Yeah, and
because like you said, I can kind of get the sound I want out of any of them.
Right. And you react differently, especially with like cymbals, percussion, but drums too. The way different drums make you play in a different way, and if you tune them slightly different, you're going to play differently, and you're going to get different responses, from your drumming, out of the just from the equipment that you're using. So that's a really cool thing. Yeah. Especially sounds like you have a lot of choices to get a lot of responses from. So
yeah. I changed it up. We started doing a kind of primary club, smaller venue focused tour, and I kind of made a hodgepodge of kits. I wrapped them all to be the same, but the bass drum's an early 60s teardrop 20-inch, and I've actually never toured with a 20-inch. I've always been 22, 24, very briefly 26. But it's the earlier 60s teardrop, which is actually a very thin shell with the re-ring, not the later 60s, which is a little bit thicker. But yeah, you're right, man. I knew, I was like, we're going to a different venue, and we were also not, Jared Neiman, the guy I played for, he wanted to approach the show differently, wanted to approach the songs differently and different. And I'm like, well, then I need to approach things differently. And the toms, because we used to tour with a percussionist. He mainly played congos and bongos and some shaker and djembe and stuff, but he wasn't going to be with us. So I thought, well, not that I'm going to necessarily cover all those parts exactly, but I want to have some sounds. And we're experimenting with some drums, I believe, for New Year's Eve, where they'd taken some ProLite toms and cut them down to 4 inches deep. And I had a 10 and a 12, and I thought, they were like, well, you want to check them out. Again, thinking it would be a bit of a novelty. I'm like, all right, I might crank the 10 up and have a timbale kind of sound, but dude, they're my rack toms now. And I can lay into them in certain ways and get that sound out of them. Or if I want just a more traditional tom sound, they're in between kind of a timbale, concert tom, normal double-headed tom. And it's funny because every place we play, our production guy, we're getting set up, and the local production guy would always be, oh, those little things. And after the show, like, I can't believe how they sounded, Yeah. So it's always like, I kind of went into it thinking it'd be a joke, and I'm like, these rule. I'm a fan. So now I guess of course, I guess I could double my drums if I'm constantly cutting them in half, and have a ton of rack toms sitting around. But it's a cool sound.
I'll have to try that because, like I said, I only have done that with the big drums. The floor toms, like more of a thundery kind of like big open dry sound. But that'd be cool for the racks.
Yeah. And like I said, I don't know if it's something they've considered, but I keep meaning to maybe just do some recording with them here to like send to everybody at SONOR. Like, I don't know if you guys have actually heard these or not, but here's what they sound like.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll get something done, or maybe I can use this interview to pressure them into to getting something done. But well, I've noticed, man, it's like, obviously, depending on if you'll watch this, or even then, I'm sure we'll still be in our crazy pandemic world and lockdown. Yeah. But I've been keeping up with you on Instagram. I'm sure a lot of people have, with your drum beat project. And it's great, man. Like, I'm always someone who's strong. Like, when I do sit down at the drums just to not record or work out something, just want to play, I'm usually someone who struggles with finding of all the different things I could practice what. And I've quite a few times just screenshotted the sheet music you've written out, and just like, you know what, I'm going to try this today. And so it's such a cool thing to do. Where'd you get the idea to do that?
Well, I think it started. For me, it's a compositional outlet. Okay, so I got into composing maybe 15 years ago. I made an all percussion record, and from that, it was compositions though. I multi-tracked and did everything myself. It was called Mobile, And from that, I started getting commissions from kind of new music post-classical ensembles to write string quartets and ensemble music. So, groups like Kronos Quartet or Silk Road Ensemble, Soul Percussion, Third Coast Percussion, Bangin' a Can All-Stars. And so I kept doing and writing these pieces, still from the perspective of a drummer, right? I'd get musical ideas, drumming ideas, and instead of me trying to work it out on the kit, I would work it out, with a 10-piece chamber ensemble or something. And so those pieces kept growing. And a couple of years ago, I was at the point where I wrote 3 concertos within a year. So one was for drum set and string orchestra, which I performed. One was for multiple percussion, but it had drum set in it, which was for the Tromp solo competition in Europe. And that was with a chamber orchestra. And then one was, I was the soloist as well. It was for drum set with a full orchestra, which I did with the Chicago Youth Symphony here. And so I had written these big, long, intense pieces. And at the end of that, it coincided with a little bit of a break I had. Because my wife got a research grant, the whole family moved to Finland for a year. And I had time away from any musical duties. I was just stay-at-home dad for that time. And of course, Sonar, being amazing as they are, sent me a kit so I could actually practice and stuff. But it was the culmination of having to write these really big, intense pieces and still wanting to compose, but not wanting to do that. I had that and I needed the balance. So I made up my mind to start composing little bitty pieces, which are like 3-second, 4-second pieces on drum set only, not having to worry about like the voicings of the second viola part, or, is this in range of the English horn or oboe, all those things which are fun and cool. But I just wanted to get back to my roots on drum set and think of beats more compositionally. So these aren't beats that necessarily I would play on a record. Some of them are busier, different voicings or feels. And sometimes I get to play beats like this on records, either with Wilco or when I do sessions. Some of the trickier stuff I've done ended up on, that I did that record with Laura Veers, Katie Lang, and Nico Case. And there's a groove on there on a tune called I-5, which is very much Tony Allen-esque, Afrobeat influenced. So sometimes it works in rock music, which is primarily what I get called to do. But for me, this was an outlet of something fun and enjoyable to do. And then it's part of a bigger project, which isn't totally unveiled yet, that deals with videos and sound files and Pro Tools files and, more open up to producers and other artists. But for right now, I'm just documenting it on Instagram and just doing one a week. I have notebooks upon notebooks filled with beats. So, what I'm posting online is, the tip of the iceberg of what's happening. But for me, it's just what my gut's been telling me the last couple of years. This is enjoyable for me. And so even though it doesn't really have a goal in sight necessarily, it's what's felt right. So I've just been pursuing it, and it's been fun just posting them once a week and just coming up with little zany ideas. Yeah, no,
they're super unique and cool. And, like I said, if people have a lot more time at home, then there's another way they can, keeping their ideas fresh, keeping their body in check as far as hands and feet and all that. So obviously besides, we got going on there with the Instagram account, any upcoming projects or, I know everything's still kind of probably on hold for you for anything as far as live performances go, but, what's it kind of looking like here in the next, kind of end of the year or next few months for you?
Well, next few months at least, because all of Wilco stuff is postponed, but we had, we had been recording a little bit before that, so I think that'll continue remotely. My duo on Fillmore with Darren Gray, which I've had for 20-some years, we've got most of a record recorded, so that'll be mixed and finished hopefully by the end of summer. And we also are working with a singer from Finland, and so hopefully get that project off the ground a little bit more. I do have a project for a festival I was supposed to participate in July, and they're doing part of the festival live. But so I was supposed to collaborate with an amazing Finnish drummer, Olavi, and Tony Buck from the Necks, a hero of mine, improvising drummer. So instead, we're doing kind of a video project where Olavi will play live, and Tony and I have recorded video. So I've got that next week. I'm going to film that, an improv thing. Cool. Doing a record for a great British singer-songwriter, multi-instrumentalist, Daniel O'Sullivan. That's coming up. Doing something small for the visual artist Glenn Kotche for a project he's got going on. So those are kind of what's in my immediate future besides the drum beat project. And like I said, the last month or so, I've been really working on solo ideas have been coming to me. So I want to kind of spend some time getting those down and maybe even recording that. So hopefully finishing another solo record before the fall. But, the reality is, with the kids out of school, I don't get that, 3 or 4 hours a day or 5 or 6 hours a day where it's just me and I get to concentrate on that because my wife is very busy with her occupation. So, I steal away. I typically get up at, in the morning, an hour or so before the entire family. That's when I come out here, get my work done, and, just do a little bit of that and steal away little minutes when I can here or there. But that's my immediate future.
Well, even with all that balancing, man, that's still a lot. That's awesome to hear. It's good to hear people staying busy, staying creative. As Tomas and I were discussing, I think it's going to be interesting to see, in a lot of different aspects, business, creativity, and everything. I think what you're going to see from people in 2 or 3 years is how they use this time and how they handle this time right now. Was it a giant roadblock for you? Was it something that you could be more creative in and progress and grow? So, that's awesome.
I have to also say, it may, again, be counterintuitive, but I think this is a wonderful opportunity for people to just chill out, too. You know what I mean? You've got this time with your families or, to yourself to expand and grow as a person. My first thought when this all went down was, okay, what am I going to get accomplished? I have to do this, because I have so many ideas that I never have time and never to get to. But something in me also just said, maybe just chill out, maybe just rejuvenate, refresh, work at things as they come to me, and I feel super inspired. But don't force anything and don't put any expectations on myself of having this period to be as productive as previous periods, because there is something I've noticed, at least in my experience, that when I take a break and shut off from my professional life, that's when I get the really good ideas. That's when I get the energy back. That's when it's like, okay, so instead of doing 3 or 4 so ideas that I would have forced myself to do, I usually come up with one really good idea and then I can pursue that. So I think it's also important to not feel a pressure that you have to get so much done because we have the time now. But,
Oh, for sure. Well, being as it sounds like you have much to get to, we'll wrap this up. But Glenn,
one thing I just realized we forgot to talk about is I also have, and I've used on the road on and off for years. It's been off the last couple of years, but I do have a couple just Sonar steel snare drums that I love. One is a black finish and one's a chrome, but I've used those on Wilco records. I've used them live countless amount of times. And that reminded me because I read recently too that I'm going to get the name wrong, but I think it was Johannes Link, right? Founded Sonar.
Johannes, yep.
Okay, so he actually, I think by all accounts, invented the metal drum. Right, Ludwig, William F. Ludwig saw his. I think it was John Philip Sousa's drummer had one of them from Germany because they would travel all over the place. He had one. Ludwig borrowed it, loved it, and copied the design. And that's when it came up with the first metal drums in the U.S. But Sonar actually preceded that, or the company that would be later become Sonar, but the same family at least. So those. We talked a lot about the wood drums and the acrylic, but those, the metal snares sound pretty great too.
Well, that's just it. We could go another 30 minutes talking about it because, what you're talking about there, that was actually technically still Sonar, I believe 1907, for all the Sonar nerds at home. That was, I believe, when the official trademark came. So that'd be like if people have ever seen the triangle logo that says Sonar on it.
But they were making drums as that family long before that.
Yeah. But I think it was called like Johannes Link Drum Manufacturer, whatever that be in German. But yeah, but yeah, you're right. And it's funny, even before I was, really, playing the drums, whatever, when I was a kid, I remember hearing from a family who happened to live in my hometown. I'm from Owensboro, Kentucky. There was a father who'd worked at the Ludwig Drum Factory when they were in Chicago. Oh. And he told me firsthand this story that, he had seen it. And I think they maybe had, I don't know if it was a gentleman's agreement where Ludwig always said per a European inspiration, and Sonar said as duplicated by a very well-known American drum manufacturer. I don't know. but I mean, at the end of the day, man, when you've been around since 1875, you're going to kind of invent the game in some regards, and so that's cool. Yeah, because I've heard, I mean, who knows, no one's left to tell us the real version of the story, but all the different versions I've heard kind of tie in with pretty much what you were saying. So we'll go with that. And then of course, you get into the cast metal drums and all that stuff in the 80s, and it's just, it gets insane. I've got a few of them here, and they're tanks, but man, they sound good.
Cool.
So, well, Glenn, thank you so much for doing this. It was great just to chat and definitely learn more about what you use with Sonar, and just, give me some ideas to maybe go check out some different stuff as well.
No, thanks for including me. And, I have to say, I still, every time I look at that Sonar roster, it's kind of like a pinch me moment. Like, wow, really, I've been able to be with this guys for 20 years, because I look at that roster and it's just like monster drummer, hero, legend after another. So it's great to be part of this family. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, thank you. Well, for everyone at home, thanks for watching. Stay safe, stay healthy, stay positive, and we'll see you on the next one.
Thanks so much.